So, let's welcome you again to the AMATIC 2013 webinar series, Teaching Statistics in the Online World with Michelle Everson. And this presentation is sponsored today by the Statistics Committee of AMATIC. And so, AMATIC is the American Mathematical Association of two-year colleges. And our core value is building expertise and exhibiting leadership in the teaching and learning of mathematics, enhancing personal growth, and improving teaching methods and effectiveness as a personally initiated lifelong responsibility. And so for more information on AMATIC, please visit our website at amatic.org. And please note that the views expressed by the presenter are not necessarily the views of AMATIC, and any commercial products mentioned by the presenter today are not endorsed by AMATIC. And so we're going to switch to the presenter slides real quickly. So if you see the slides disappear off of your screen, that's why. So we are going to go to the revised slides here that hopefully have the typos here fixed. So let's give it a second to pop up. So for some reason it didn't go directly to the first slide. I apologize about that, Michelle, but let's get right to Michelle so that we have the full time of her presentation. So again, this is Teaching Statistics in the Online World with Michelle Everson, and I'll turn it over to you right now, Michelle.
Thanks, John. Well, hopefully you can all hear me okay. Again, my name is Michelle Everson, and I'm from the Department of Educational Psychology at the University of Minnesota. And I'm really excited to be here today talking with you because teaching statistics, or teaching is my passion, but teaching online has become a great passion of mine, and I really love it. And I especially love to talk to other online instructors or instructors who are just starting to think about teaching online. So to go over what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me, and then I thought I'd start at the beginning, just some things to think about as you're planning for and designing an online course. As I was looking at the chat window before we got started, it looks like we have lots of different people here today. Some of you are just starting to think about teaching online or are planning to teach online, and it looks like others have some online teaching experience. So that's really great. I hope I can learn a lot from you today during this presentation. I'm also going to talk about some of what I've learned about managing the online course once it's underway, evaluating the course and making improvements in the course. And then I thought I would end with some lessons that I've learned over the years and some advice I would share with new online instructors. And I also wanted to share some great tools with you that I've been using, and there are lots of really great free tools out there for the online instructor, and I just wanted to share some of my favorites with you. So to tell you a little bit about me, this is me with my dog Daisy, and I am currently a senior lecturer at the University of Minnesota. Again, I'm in the Department of Educational Psychology, and within our department, I'm in the Quantitative Methods in Education track. And within that, I'm actually part of a graduate program in statistics education. So I'm one of 4 faculty members in that program. And some of you may have heard of Joan Garfield. She's one of my colleagues, and she has been a really great mentor to me. She's a leader in the statistics education field, a real pioneer in that field. My own background is actually in psychology and education. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in psychology. I minored in statistics. I took a lot of statistics in graduate school. I came to the University of Minnesota to actually study educational psychology and focus on learning and cognition. But my second year in our grad program, I started working with Joan. I was her teaching assistant. And Joan always talks about how she has a passion for teaching, and that really rubbed off on me. I soon discovered I loved teaching, and I especially loved teaching statistics. And so I've been doing that ever since. I finished my degree in 2002, and then I was hired on as a lecturer. And since 2003, I've been involved in designing online courses and teaching online. So in terms of planning and designing an online course, I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir here when I say this, but I think that designing an online course and planning for it is really not as simple as just taking everything you do in the classroom and putting it online. And I say this because I've heard some horror stories from other instructors or other students who are taking online courses, which are basically just all they're doing in the online courses are maybe looking at the instructor slides. So the instructor's just taken all of his or her stuff from the classroom and put it online, and students need to go through it at whatever pace they want to, or students just sit and watch online lectures. And I feel like an online course should be much more than that. So when you're thinking about planning an online course, there are lots of questions you need to ask yourself and lots of things that you need to think about. For instance, okay, so how will students learn from and interact with the material? This is certainly very important. When I was first starting to think about teaching online, again, this was back in 2003, and at that time I was really concerned about internet connections that students would have. I worried that, if I put lots of videos online, would students be able to easily download those types of things? So when I first started teaching, most of my materials were in text format, and I'll talk about that a little bit later and show you some examples of that. I'm slowly moving now to doing more videos and things like that with changes in technology, but this is something you'll definitely want to think about. How are students going to learn from and interact with your material? How will they interact with each other and with you? So our courses in the classroom are very student-centered. Students work through activities. They're not really lecture-type courses, and we wanted our online courses also to be very student-centered. So we had to think very carefully about how we would set things up so that students had opportunities to learn from each other and talk with each other, and so that we would have opportunities as well to talk with them. Also thinking about just how much time it's going to take students to get through different assignments and activities. You could go through an activity in the classroom, it might take you 20 or 30 minutes. But if you're doing that same activity online, it might take several days for students to work through it, because not everyone is necessarily going to be able to be online at the same time. There is going to be more reading and writing involved generally on the part of students, and that takes time. So that's something definitely to think about. How much of a time investment will it be for the instructor to keep up with the class? So there is definitely a lot involved from the instructor vantage point as the online course is going on. And also what type of classroom management system you will use and what kind of support you will get for using it. Right now we use Moodle at the University of Minnesota, but before that we had choices in terms of classroom management systems. We used to have something called Web Vista, which was a lot like Blackboard if you're familiar with that. And I used to use Web Vista, and then we all had to switch over to Moodle. Luckily, we have a lot of support for using Moodle, and we have really great instructional technology staff who can help us. But if you don't have that kind of support, that's certainly something you'll need to think about. Is it all going to fall on you to correct problems with the website, or will you have somebody you can turn to get some help and get some support when you need it? Also, just how will you handle tests and exams in the online course? So I'll talk a little bit later about what we do in our courses, but that's certainly something to be thinking about as well. And please let me know if I'm moving too fast or if you have any questions. It's always kind of weird to do webinars when you can't really see everybody, but I definitely want to answer your questions and give you as much advice as I can here. So I'm going to be talking today, I'm just going to give you some examples of some of what we do, and I'm going to focus mostly on 2 different online courses that I currently teach. I teach altogether 4 online courses, so in addition to introductory courses in statistics, I teach an intermediate statistics course online, and we also have a course in our statistics education program called Becoming a Teacher of Statistics, and I've taught that online as well. But we have 2 introductory courses. One is at the undergraduate level, and the other is at the graduate level. So in the first column here, we have our undergraduate course. And both courses, I guess, are relatively small, I would say. At most, we have about 45 students. And I guess I think of that as sort of being a smallish type course. It definitely seems like a lot because there's a lot of work to keep up with, but I know other online instructors who teach hundreds of students at a time. So this is definitely small in comparison to that. In our undergraduate course, we're currently using a randomization-based curriculum. And I have a link here if you want to learn more about that curriculum. It's based on a grant called the Catalyst Grant that my colleagues had, and they developed some curriculum that's randomization-based. So students learn about modeling and simulation in the course. In our graduate course, it's a more traditional type curriculum. So we begin with descriptive statistics and then get into normal distributions and sampling distributions and inference. In our undergrad course, the students, they don't have a formal textbook in the online course, but we put a lot of materials online and we encourage them to make their own textbooks with those materials. We use the Mind on Statistics textbook in our graduate level course, but we're actually now starting to think about revising that graduate level course. We want to include more randomization-based methods in the course. So next year we're going to actually start using Statistics Unlocking the Power of Data by Robin Locke and his family. We also have many assignments in both courses, so I've listed them here, and I'll talk in more detail about these a little bit later. But one thing you might notice is that in both courses there's a lot of discussion. So there are several group discussion assignments in each course. And again, we might have up to 45 students. We use Tinkerplot software in our undergraduate course. And in the graduate level course, I give students an option of using either R, SPSS, or StatCrunch. When we first started developing our online courses, again, one really big thing that we wanted is to create student-centered learning environments. And one framework we had in mind as we were thinking about our online courses were the GAGE recommendations. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with those recommendations. If you're not, I have a link here for you. GAGE stands for Guidelines for Assessment and Instruction in Statistics Education. And these are recommendations that were put together by a group of educators and researchers in statistics education. So the GAGE College Report actually came out in 2005. If you go to this website, you'll see there's a GAGE College Report and there's a K through 12 report. So these are all based on the college report. And we wanted our online courses to incorporate these 6 different GAGE recommendations. So we wanted to emphasize statistical literacy and develop statistical thinking. We wanted to use real data, stress conceptual understanding. Fostering active learning was very important to us. Using technology to develop conceptual understanding was important. And of course, using assessments to improve and evaluate student learning. So again, this is where we started from. We really wanted our online courses to adhere to the different GAGE recommendations. And these recommendations were put forward before the popularity of online courses. So those who were putting these GAGE recommendations together weren't necessarily thinking of online courses at that time, but we feel like all of these certainly apply to the online environment. A little bit more about our strategy. So when we were first planning the course, we decided that we were going to take each week in the course and make that a module. We wanted, again, activity and discussion to be a really big part of the course. We decided we wanted to, in addition to the textbook, we wanted to share some lecture notes with students. So we thought a lot about the kinds of things we would go over in the classroom and what we would talk about in the classroom. Ways that we would wrap up different activities. So we wanted to be able to share that information with our online students. And again, initially we decided to do that in text format. So we would post a set of lecture notes each week or short wrap-ups that went along with different activities. We've also now started using videos a lot. So we create videos and we share them with our students, mostly to help them learn software and to demonstrate how to solve different kinds of problems. Sometimes we'll use videos as more of a just-in-time teaching approach. So if a student maybe has a question, they don't know where to find something on the website, or they're struggling with a particular problem, I can easily put a video together and try to help them. And again, later on, I'll tell you about some of the tools I use. There are some really great free tools out there where you can create videos and upload them to YouTube, and that's what I usually do in my courses. One thing that I feel is extremely important is to think about what you're going to do before the semester starts in terms of getting things ready, in terms of letting students know about the course, and also what's going to go on during week one, because I really feel like that sets the tone of the whole semester. And we really try to make that a time where students are getting acquainted with the course and trying to make sure that the course is going to be the right fit for them. So what I've always tried to do with my online courses is I try to have as much of my course sites ready to go as I can about a week before a new semester begins. And sometimes it's not possible for me to have everything up for the whole semester. If I can do that, that's great, because that saves me a lot of time during the semester. But I'll try to have maybe 4 or 5 weeks ready to go on the course site a week before a new semester begins. And then I'll release the site to students, and I'll contact them. I'll send them a detailed letter. And in the letter, I introduce them to the course and to myself. I send them a syllabus. I really encourage them to take some time to explore the site if they can before the semester begins, just to make sure that it's going to be the right fit for them. I've had a lot of students who come to the online course and they assume it's going to be more of an independent type study course, or they have some misconceptions about what the course is going to be like. They don't think there are going to be deadlines every week that they have to meet. They don't think they're going to actually have to work with or talk with anyone else in the class. They can just do things at whatever pace they want. And our course is not like that at all. And I see that Amber just posted a question, is the letter through mail or in an email? I do send it in an email. Certainly I think you could send that through regular mail. I've always just done everything through email. And it seems like most students do take some time before the course starts to look at the site. Not everyone does, but many of them I do notice that they will check in before the course actually starts. So I send them this letter. We invite students to attend an optional in-person orientation that we have during week one of the semester. So we always try to set aside time during the first week to meet with students in person. And a lot of students generally do come to these meetings, especially in our graduate course. We get quite a few students come to the meetings. In our undergrad course, it might be about 50%. And it really depends on whether the students are in the area. Sometimes we have a lot of students who are taking the course and they don't actually live in Minnesota, or they live very far from Minneapolis, so they can't come to the meeting. But we do have an in-person meeting. We invite students to come. I give students a link to a website, and I've included this here, and there are many such links out there, but it's basically just a short quiz that students could take to see if an online course is the right fit for them. A lot of the students who take my course have taken online courses before, so it's not totally new for them. But if it is a new experience, I usually ask students to try to take this particular quiz. And I also give students a handout called Tips for Success in the Online Course. And I noticed Crystal posted a question. I'm certainly happy to share this. At the end, I think I have my email address, but please contact me. I'm certainly happy to share anything here that I present. I'm happy to share it with you. But I didn't do this right away. I just started doing this maybe the last 5 or 6 years. But I send students a handout along with the syllabus called Tips for Success in the Online Course. And it just includes all the things that I've noticed over the years that seem to differentiate the more successful students from the less successful students. So I talk to them about making sure that they check in on a regular basis with our class announcements forum, check email on a regular basis, make sure that they know where to find things on the website, make sure that they organize the handouts that are presented on the website, make sure that they ask questions when they're lost, or participate fully in the different discussion assignments. So I see there are lots of questions right now. I'm sorry I'm not getting to all of them, but I hope I can come back to some of them a little bit later on. So John, please interrupt me if there's a really important question, because I'm happy to stop and answer that. Okay, so again, week one. I try to make week one somewhat light in terms of assignments that are due, just because I feel like there's a lot that students need to get used to in terms of the way the online course is set up. And so I try to make week one a time where students are really getting acquainted with the course, getting acquainted with each other, making sure they know where to find things, making sure that they reach out to me and ask questions. I'm very vigilant during the first week to make sure that everyone in the course logs on to the course site. If I see after the week that there are certain students who have not posted anything or who have not even logged on to Moodle one time, I will reach out to those students and try to see what's going on with those students and whether they actually still want to stay in the course or not. It's very easy for students to get behind if they don't really hit the ground running during week one. So we really want to make sure that students are doing what they're supposed to be. During week one, typically I'll have some kind of activity where I ask students to introduce themselves to each other. And oftentimes I'll set up a special discussion forum for them to make their introductions. I encourage them to post photos if they can. Often I'll have a few little questions I'll ask students to answer, and generally they're just questions like, what is your major or your field of study? One fun question I often ask students is, what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word statistics? That often gets some very interesting responses. And students, I think, a lot of the students who take our courses are nervous about statistics or anxious about statistics. So I think that this tends to be a good icebreaker. They start to see pretty early on that they're not the only ones who are feeling nervous or anxious. They're not the only ones who maybe have a negative opinion about statistics entering the course. A lot of students think it's just going to be a math course, and we try to get students to see early on that statistics and math are not necessarily the same things. Sometimes we'll have activities during the first week where we ask students to become acquainted with their discussion groups. So I'll talk to you in a little bit about how I set up discussion groups in the course. Sometimes I'll ask them to come up with rules for how they will work together in the groups. So that might be a first week activity. Oftentimes I'll have some kind of assignment which I call a scavenger hunt, or it could be a syllabus quiz. So I put an assignment together where I basically just ask students lots of questions that to answer the questions, they'll have to have read through the syllabus carefully, and they'll have to have spent some time going through the website. And there's also different tasks that I ask them to complete as part of the assignment. So as an example, in my graduate level course, I have an assignment where I ask them several questions about things in the syllabus. I ask them what different links on the course website, what will happen if they click on those links, and how they can find different things on the website. I might have them go to a certain week and tell me what assignment they have to complete that week. I often will ask students in my graduate course to complete a survey during week one, and this has been really great for me. When I first put my course online, one thing I was thinking about is that when I'm in the classroom with students, we do quite a few activities where I actually gather data from the students in class, and we use that data to work through different activities. And I thought a lot about how I was going to do that when I taught online. And so when I first started teaching online, I thought about all the different activities that involved gathering data from my students. And I thought about the kind of data I was gathering. And I basically created a survey that students would complete during the first week where I would be able to gather much of that data. And then we have that data and we could come back to that at various points during the semester. So I always ask students to complete a survey during the first week of class. And again, we get lots of rich data that we can come back to. Oftentimes I'll use Google Docs to create a survey. So there are lots of great tools out there that you can use to create surveys. But that's been a big time saver for me. So these are things that typically go on during the first week. A typical week in my online course is that I'll start each week with an overview of the week. So there's a handout that generally lays out the plan for the week, so the objectives and goals for the week, the reading assignments students have to work through or read through during the week, and also all the important assignments and activities and what the due dates are. So I put that up generally as a PDF file. This semester in my graduate level course, I've started creating short videos that also give an overview for the week. So I have a video along with the PDF, so students can really look at either one of those if they want to. Also, each weekly module has links to additional readings, links to handouts or other important resources that students will need for the week, links to discussion forums, and also links to submit assignments. So I really try on the website to have a consistent structure from week to week so that early on students can really get a sense of what the course is going to be like, what a typical week will be like. And I hope that they'll soon see that the structure is very similar from week to week, and they'll get used to that very early on. This is just I know this is you probably can't read this very well, but this is just a quick screenshot of what our Moodle course site looks like. So this is my undergrad course site. And actually what you're seeing here is the instructor point of view. I probably should have changed this to the student vantage point. But a lot of the links over on the right side, or the left side of the page, the students wouldn't necessarily see. But hopefully you can see that at the top there's a Start Here button. So I have some information that I ask students to look at right away to start the semester. And then I have lots of other links that are always going to be here at the top of the page when students log on. And so mostly they are links to the syllabus. There's a place students can go to meet me or learn more about me and learn more about our teaching assistant. There's a class announcements forum that we tell students to check on a regular basis. We have a link to a chat room where we can hold our online office hours. And then down here below on the screen is one of the weekly modules. So this is the first week. And I just wanted to show you kind of how things are laid out. So again, it begins with an overview for the week, and then we have a section for readings and handouts. And then you can't really see it here, but if you scroll down, there are discussion forums, etc. So that's what my course site looks like in Moodle. So again, one really big thing about my course is that students are engaged quite a bit in discussion. So that's something that I really love about my online courses. I love working with students in the discussion forums. I love seeing them interact with each other. And again, when I first started developing this online course, I had never taken an online course myself. So I wasn't really sure of what I could do, what was possible, or what I should do. And I read an article by Clem, and a lot of the articles all of the articles I'll be referencing in this PowerPoint, I will have them available in a reference section at the end. But this article from Clem was very influential to me because Clem outlined several different suggestions for how we can get students engaged in discussions. And I've taken a lot of these things and just run with them. So I do a lot of these things in my own courses. So I require participation as part of the grade. In our undergraduate course, it's actually 40% of students' grades. So we tell them very early on that this is a course where you're going to have a lot of interaction with your peers, and it's very important that you stay on top of that because it's a big portion of your grade. I form small groups, so students complete all of their discussion assignments in smaller discussion groups. I try to make things interesting, so I'll share some examples of my discussion assignments in a moment. And I always require a deliverable, so to get credit for an assignment, students need to, or someone in the group has to actually summarize the discussion and submit that summary. And I don't let peers grade each other. I have tried that before. I don't routinely do it, and part of the reason I stopped doing it is just because I found that some students were just overly harsh in terms of grading their peers, and others tended to be overly lenient in terms of just giving everyone full credit regardless of how much those peers actually participated. So I kind of decided early on that wasn't really working the way I wanted it to. But certainly I think it's something to think about when you're setting up discussion assignments. So why use discussion? Well, we've always had courses that are very student-centered. Again, we've always used discussion in our courses. And as I've looked to the literature on distance education and read more about discussion, there have been certain things that have really stood out for me and excited me about using discussion. And so I won't read through these quotes exactly here. But the first one really, I like this particular quote from Keir because it's all about how how all students in a class can benefit from discussion. So it's not just the student who asks the question or the student who answers the question, but it's also the student who sits back and observes the interaction between his or her peers. This lower quote by Smith et al. Talks about how because of the fact that students are posting things in discussion forums where others can see them in the semi-permanent environment, that might really change the way they think through an assignment. They might think more deeply about their thoughts when they know they have to post them and others are going to look at them. I certainly haven't been able to collect evidence in favor of this or not, but I often think that students, or I hope that they're thinking a little bit more deeply just because of the fact that they have to share their opinions in a public forum with their peers. And then in 2008, Randy Groth wrote an interesting article, and I really love this particular quote. So he talks about how discussion boards can preserve this written record of what's going on, and how they can really make all the conversations that are going on in the classroom a little bit more manageable from the instructor point of view. So if you think about being in a classroom, you might have students working in small groups, and you walk around the room and you hear little bits and pieces of different discussions, but you're never going to hear any particular discussion from start to finish. So there are things that you might miss that are said in different groups that normally you would probably like to address because maybe misconceptions are being voiced or things of that nature. But in an online course, you have that record of everything. So you can go back to that later and look at it, and that can give you more information that can be helpful in terms of what you do for instruction. So it can help you tailor the way you instruct your students. So that's one of the reasons I really love online discussion. So in my courses, what I typically do is at the start of the semester, I will randomly assign students to a discussion group. Typically, the group sizes are between 4 and 6 students. And then I ask them to work through several assignments as a group. The assignments involve discussing concepts and answering questions as a group. A lot of times in my courses, I will change the groups halfway through the semester. So I want students to have opportunities to work with other students and meet other peers during the semester. To get full credit for discussions, I ask that students post their own thoughts and then respond in a meaningful way to at least 2 other posts. And what I do in my courses is I put together a handout called Guidelines for Group Discussion, and I share that with the students right at the beginning of the semester. I ask them to read this. And I try to give some good examples about what I mean by responding in a meaningful way. So it's not just saying something like, oh yeah, I agree with what you said, Joe, or I think the same thing, Sally. But it's more that you're trying to move the discussion forward, you're asking questions, you're showing that you've taken some time to really think about what your peer has posted. If I see that students are not doing this, I will jump in and ask them questions. I try to tell my students right away at the beginning of the semester that I always feel there's something they could be asking a question about. I always feel there's something that they can be responding to, and so I try to participate in discussions as a way of modeling that for students. I always ask for every discussion for one student to volunteer to lead the discussion and then summarize the discussion and post a summary of that discussion. So the whole group will lose some credit if no summary is posted. So that's kind of the incentive for them to elect a leader and get a summary posted. And oftentimes I'll give the person who writes the summary an extra credit point. So that's an incentive for someone to step up to do that. And in our courses, depending on which course it is, students typically have about 4 to 7 days to complete their discussions. So they usually have less time in our undergraduate course because we have more discussions in that course. In the graduate course, they have a week to work through these assignments. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the groups are always subject to change. This is just a quick screenshot of Moodle again to show you what a discussion forum looks like. So this is one group forum, and what I've done is I've set up topics for each of the questions on the assignment. So this was a particular assignment where there were 4 discussion questions, and students will answer each question, and then one student will share a summary, and sometimes the students will post additional topics if there are other things that they want to talk about during the discussion. Again, I know you can't read this very clearly, but this is just what one of those topics looks like. So I begin with the question, and then students come and respond, and then students will respond to each other. So when I first started teaching online, of course, I thought about, how can I create good discussion questions? I worried a lot about how I would set up my discussion assignments, and I guess one of my biggest worries was, what if everybody has the same answer to the question and they feel there's nothing they can talk about? If you all arrive at the same answer right away, what is there really to discuss? And so I try to avoid those kinds of assignments when I put my questions together. I try to think about things that students can talk about where there's not necessarily going to be just one right answer. And so you can ask students to brainstorm. So we often will have assignments where we might share with students a media report, and the report talks about some study that was conducted. The study might be flawed in some ways, and so we'll ask students to identify what those are. So I have one particular assignment where, again, this goes back to the student survey data that I collect from students, but I'll ask students to think about the variables in the student survey data file and to think about which of those variables they would expect to have the most variability and why. So students will make these predictions before they actually look at the data, and then they'll test the predictions. And oftentimes, not all students are going to think the same variables are going to have the most variability. So there are often lots of different things put forward in that discussion. Again, asking students to explain in their own words what a particular concept means to them. So asking students, when you hear the term normal distribution, what do you think about? How would you explain that to someone else? Asking students to relate concepts to their own fields of study or their own lives. So we might be talking about the two-sample t-test, and I might ask students to try to come up with a research question from their own field that would involve conducting a two-sample t-test. Asking students to come up with unique examples, asking them to critique examples posted by their peers. Asking them to describe how they arrived at the answer to a particular question. Asking them to reason about why certain results might occur when they attempt to explore data. Asking them to discuss a concept that they might have some misconceptions or misunderstandings about. So a long time ago, I used to have a discussion assignment where I gave students about 4 or 5 statements related to interpreting a confidence interval. And some of those statements were clearly incorrect and others were correct. And I asked students to talk about them and to identify the correct statements. And through talking about this, a lot of their own misunderstandings or misconceptions about confidence intervals came up during the discussion. And so I was able to address those and talk with students about them in more detail. And again, I have lots of different example assignments. I'm certainly happy to share any of these with you if you want to see any of these in more detail. These are just some things that I've done in my courses. The very first assignment in my graduate course is that students read a media report about a study that looked at using Facebook and concluded that Facebook has a negative impact on GPA. So students read that report. They look at another handout that I actually got from the researchers who conducted that study. They sent me, basically they had presented a poster at a conference and they sent me a copy of that poster. So I share that with students so they can learn a few more details about the study. And then they talk about some of the problems with the study and again brainstorm about how they would set up a different study. There's an assignment that deals with variability. Students talk about what variability is. This third bullet point, who should I take a course from, Dr. X or Dr. Y? That's an assignment that relates to the normal distribution. So I share some statistics with students about 2 professors and their grade distributions for a final exam. Both are normal, but they have a different mean and standard deviation. And students have to talk about, who it would be better to take a course from, who do they have a better chance, or which professor would assign more A's, who assigns more F's, etc. There's another media report about swearing and how it reduces pain. So students read about that, and they talk about that when we get to our hypothesis testing unit. There is a study I asked, or a media report I asked students to read about related to what predicts success in college. So they talk about that when we're looking at correlation. Is there a relationship between junk food preference and personality type? So we get into that when we're talking about chi-square. And there's also an interesting article about whether instructors might be more negative if they're grading with red ink. So this was I learned about this study based on a National Public Radio report, an NPR report. So I heard about the study, the author of the study was being interviewed. I found the actual study and I share that with students. And they talk about that. The study does a lot of two-sample t-tests. So when we get to that topic in the course, that's when I usually introduce this study. And students basically talk with each other and critique the study and try to think if they could design a better study. And these are just a few other example assignments. So these 3 assignments go along with our randomization-based curriculum in our undergraduate course. So one of them has to do with the iPod Shuffle. One has to do with the study about people being able to match dogs to owners. So do dogs tend to look like their owners? Another one relates to a study about infants, and are infants more attracted to helping behavior or hindering behavior? So when I first started teaching online, I wasn't really sure about how I should be involved in discussions. Initially, I was very worried about stifling discussion if I was involved a little bit too much. So when I first started teaching, I wasn't involved that much in discussion. I kind of let students talk, and clearly if things were getting way off track, I would jump in. But I wouldn't really talk with them that much as they were discussing. And when I started gathering midterm feedback from students, I learned that they really wanted me to check in a little bit more. So now I try to participate in many ways in discussion, and there are, I feel like, many ways that you can participate in discussion without actually stifling the discussion. So oops, sorry about that. So there are lots of different ways that an instructor can be a part of the discussion. Am I starting to run low on time, John? I was just looking at the clock and I see that it's already 4:45.
I think you have about 10 more minutes if you want to take 10 more minutes.
Okay, so I maybe should go through things really quickly here then to make sure I have enough time. But there are many ways that you can... Is that okay?
Okay. That's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. I feel like I've been talking too long here, but again, there are many ways that you can be involved in the discussion without necessarily giving all the answers away. So just trying to question students, trying to highlight important things that are shared, sharing some of your own examples. So I give a few different tips here about how the instructor can be involved in discussion. So I'm going to have to go through some of these slides quickly here, but again, we have homework assignments in our different courses, so the assignments often involve using technology. So we just ask students to paste output that they get in different software packages in either Word or PDF, and then they upload those assignments. I'm fortunate in that I have a teaching assistant who can help me with some of the grading, so that's been really helpful. In our graduate course, students complete a project, so they have to gather some of their own data, and basically the data or the project is such where they have to end up doing either a two-sample t-test or a paired t-test. So they submit the project in parts, so throughout the semester they're constantly working on their project. And again, I'm happy to share any handouts if anyone wants to see more details about these assignments. In our courses, we don't really have a setup at our university where students can take exams in a proctored environment. And so one of the biggest questions I get when I tell people I teach online is, how do you prevent cheating in the online course? And, unless you can have everybody come in and be in a proctored setting or find proctors, I think, there's always the possibility that that could go on. We try to minimize cheating as much as we can. So the exams in our course, we think of them as being very similar to the take-home exams you might get in a regular classroom. And so what we try to do is we change the exams from semester to semester if we can. We try to insist, if we can, that students complete the exams in one sitting. So in some of our courses, we might have the exams online and students have to actually finish them, within maybe 3 hours of starting them. We try to use a lot of open-ended questions where students have to actually explain their answers. If you use some kind of online system to deliver the exams, you can randomize the order of questions that students get, and this can be helpful. We try to ask that students adhere to an honor code of some kind. So that's what we do, again, in our classes. I know that some universities do have places students can come to take things in a proctored environment, but we don't really have that. And so we've tried to make the exams such that they're not really high stakes. So we hope that the students aren't, an exam wouldn't be 50% of the grade, for example. So we hope that because of that, and because the grades are based on so many other things, that students are going to be less motivated to cheat, given, of course, the ramifications of what would happen if they were caught cheating. So quickly, just some lessons I've learned from teaching online over the years. Teaching online can be a really big time commitment. I liken an online course to a city that never sleeps. So students are doing things at all times of the day and night. Every day there often is email that I have to keep up with, questions that are posted. So it can be a lot of work when it's going on, just because there are often things going on throughout the week, rather than maybe you have a bunch of stuff going on just on one particular day or a couple days, as you might have in a regular classroom environment. Online courses are not for everyone, so they're not the right fit for all students. And again, we really try to educate students about what our course is like, and we try to talk with them about whether this is actually the right fit for them. I feel like one great thing about teaching online is that you really get to know your students in a much different way. I often have felt like I've gotten closer to my online students just because I feel like I have more direct contact with every single student, a lot of times through discussion, than I might have in a regular classroom situation. We found that students appreciate timely communication with the instructor and teaching assistant, organization, and consistent deadlines. We see that a lot on our feedback from the course. We do often gather midterm feedback from students, so I would say if you have that opportunity, it's a really great way to find out while the class is going on what's working and what's not, and maybe make some adjustments if you can. Again, using online discussion can provide you with opportunities you might not get in a normal classroom in terms of being able to hear all discussions from start to finish. We shouldn't assume that the students who take an online course will be more tech savvy than other students. So there are a lot of students who might be coming back to school after many years away, and they might not know the computer as well as we think they should. For example, they might not really even know how to take a screenshot. They might not know how to attach something to email. So students are coming into the course at all different levels. Students need deadlines in order to stay on task and complete assignments in a timely manner. So with a lot of our discussion assignments, we try to have deadlines during the middle of the week so that students aren't waiting until the very end of the week to actually start the assignment, but there's maybe a midweek deadline so that they can at least post their initial thoughts by a certain time and then have the time to actually come back and reflect on things. Finding opportunities to collaborate and commiserate with others who teach online is priceless. So with a colleague, I actually set up a group. We call it Statistics Instructors Lost in Cyberspace, and we've recently moved that group to CauseWeb. So I encourage you to go here if you want to learn more about our group, and there's a discussion forum where you can talk with other online statistics instructors. This has been very beneficial to me because most of my colleagues do not teach online, so I like being able to have other people to talk about certain online issues with. Also, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are many great resources available out there on Merlot, on CauseWeb. So there are lots of great things out there that you can easily incorporate into your own online courses. Quickly, I'll go through this. What I still don't know, what's the best way to grade a discussion assignment? Right now, I grade mostly based on participation. I'm not sure if that's the best way to go. How to best deal with students who are rude or say inappropriate things during discussion. Luckily, I have not had to deal with a lot of that. I have had colleagues who have, though. So that's something to really be thinking about. How to find that perfect balance so you're not online much more than you need to be. Sadly, I haven't quite found that yet. I'm working toward that. But I tend to be online almost every day, just trying to keep up with different discussions that are going on. How can you motivate students who don't seem to see any benefits to discussing course content with their peers? How can you make sure that they're reading important information that you share? So that's something still that I'm not quite sure about. What's the perfect blend of video and text to include in the online course? So again, I mostly present things in text format. So the next couple screens are just some examples of what my lecture notes might look like in the course. I'm starting, though, to do more things now with video. So there's a really great, wonderful program. I love it. I can't say that enough. It's called Screencast-O-Matic. It's available for free. You can upgrade to the Pro version, but even that's very cheap. And that's what you're seeing up here on the top here. So students can see me down in the corner here, and it shows my screen so I can work through problems for them. There's a new tool that was developed at our university. It's called Flipgrid, and I'll have a link to that here at the end. And this is something that I use for students to introduce themselves to each other. So here's me over here on the right. And basically, I created a small video, and I took a picture of myself. And then my TA came and she did the same thing, and then we had several students who came in. And so this ends up forming a grid, and you can go through the grid and click on it. You only have 90 seconds to record a video. So basically I did this just as a way for students to introduce themselves and for us to put some faces to names. There are lots of great tools for online instructors. Here are some of my favorite ones. The first two here are screencast programs. Both of them are free. Audacity is sort of like it's for podcasts. There's VoiceThread where you can do voice and video. VideoAnt is a tool developed at the University of Minnesota where you can download videos, for example, from YouTube, and you can annotate the videos so students can maybe have a discussion about a video. Flipgrid, and there are Uvu, free conference calls, Skype, so different ways you can connect with your students. I forgot to include on here Google Docs. That's a great way for students to do things together, to create surveys. There's Survey Gizmo as well. That's a really great tool. Okay, so I think that I've gotten through everything here. So the last couple slides are just links to all the different things that I talked about, or references that I found to be very helpful over the years as I've been planning my own online courses. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions in the time we have left. I hope that I didn't rush through things too quickly.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I think that from the questions that I've seen in the chat, people would be more than happy to have a copy of the slides after, because they have been very helpful and very much filled with information. I am going to put up the survey link real quickly so that the people who do have to leave right away can leave right away. But then if you don't mind staying around for a few questions, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, and I'm going to go back. Someone just asked about the slide that has Merlot in it, I think. The link to Merlot.
Okay.
Oh, and I saw something in the chat about responding in a timely manner to student questions. One thing I put in my syllabus is that I tell students that at most I'll take about 48 hours to respond to emails. More and more lately, I've started to realize that I can't be working 7 days a week, so I try, if I can, to take some time off during the weekend. So I might have something in the syllabus that says, if you have a question over the weekend, I may not be able to respond until Monday. A lot of times, though, I generally will respond within about 24 hours, just because I'm online quite a bit anyway.
And, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to change the slides without giving you a warning, but I do need to make sure that the survey link is going to come up here in a minute.
Okay.
Let's see. So just to wrap up real quickly before Michelle takes more questions, just thank you again for participating in today's AMATIC webinar. And if you'd like to support future AMATIC webinars, please consider becoming a member of AMATIC at amatic.org/join-AMATIC. And please like us on Facebook at facebook.com/AMATIC. And recording of past AMATIC webinars, including this one, will be able to be found at bit.ly/AMATIC webinars. This one should take us about 1 to 2 weeks to produce and upload to the archive. And if you could please take a couple of minutes to evaluate the webinar content and the presenter today at bit.ly/AMATIC105, that would be great. And if you need email confirmation of your participation in the webinar today, just please fill in the optional section at the end with your name and email address so that I can make sure that you're going to get your certificate for participation today. Yes, if you could type your email in the chat, that would be great, Michelle. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Also, I saw that Luann has a question. She says, I still have the question about the requirement about each member of a team being required to submit a summarization. And I'm not sure if this is based on what I presented, but in my courses, I don't require that anyone submit a summary. Or I don't require that everyone do that. So for a group, someone in the group has to submit a summary. But basically, students volunteer to do that. So if one student never volunteers to do that, that's fine as long as someone else in the group will do it. I think it would be great if everyone did take a turn at that, because I've often heard good things from students about how when they're the leader and they're summarizing, they pay more attention to the conversation, and it gives them a chance to synthesize things in a different way. So I don't know if there are any other questions I can answer now.
Okay, well, at this point, it seems like the questions are winding down, so I am going to stop the recording at this point.
Okay.
So I've actually